Well, good morning. The Western Thoracic Surgical Association provides its members ample opportunities of pride and privilege. In my instance, one of my greatest privileges has been getting to know our president closely over the last year. And it's a proud moment to be able to introduce this fine gentleman to our members and friends. As you can all see, our handsome and charming president was born an adorable young lad, which shouldn't come as a surprise. After all, he was born to, are the slides advancing? There you go. After all, he was born to two dashing young parents, Charles and Judy. After being born in Salt Lake City, in this very state of Utah, Mike's family moved up to Oakland, California, when Mike's dad, Charles, was drafted to play for the Oakland Raiders. Charles is here today joining us. Mike recollects his childhood very fondly. Growing up in a loving family with his parents and his brother Kevin, with whom he continues to share a very special bond. Kevin is here today with us, with his wife, Paige, who I had the privilege of working with when she was a neonatologist when I was at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Seen in the picture is their cousin, Erica, who's here as well. Family grew up together very closely and celebrated 50th wedding anniversary of their parents together. Growing up, Mike says, Ram, sports was pretty much my life. Seen in this picture is his dad, Charles, scoring the winning touchdown his rookie year with the Raiders against Joe Namath and the New York Jets. Mike's brother, Kevin, played football for UCLA and was also subsequently drafted by the Raiders, seen here with his team in the picture, and finished his career with the Green Bay Packers. But interestingly, Mike's father would not let his kids play football until they were in high school. Mike says, education was always a priority for us. So, when Mike started playing football in high school, he says he had a lot to catch up on. He started as a free safety, then soon became a wide receiver in his senior year, and he's proud to report that his team was undefeated his entire senior year. Mike wanted to continue to play football in college, but ended up going to Berkeley, playing football without a scholarship. But of course, true to Mike's spirit, he proved himself the very first year, received that football scholarship by the second year, and was the starting wide receiver by his sophomore year. And as you can see, he did pretty well for himself, making the program cover his senior year. But the most memorable moment for Mike was because he was the best in track. He still holds the record for 300-meter hurdles and 4x400 relay. His track expertise meant that Mike got to carry the Olympic torch in relay as it came from Greece to Los Angeles for the 1984 Olympics. The picture of this torch still hangs on the wall in his parents' house. Mike said he always grew up wanting to be a pro football player like his dad. In fact, he used to dress up as a football player for Halloween. But true to himself, Mike was also smart and academically gifted. He would play 60 hours of football during the season, every week, and then do his college, all the pre-med classes, manage sports travel, and do his labs at night after practice. Well, he got so good at doing this that he was selected to the official Pac-10 all-academic team, and he won the Honda Scholar Athlete Award in 1989. I don't think you can read well what's there in the award that he got, but the last line says, true to Mike, congratulations to one of the guys who makes the plays and the grades. Well, that scholastic achievement served him very well in his senior year. Now, this is a story, Mike says, biting his lip a little bit. Mike was part of the Berkeley team that played the Orange Bowl game against the University of Miami in Miami. The MCAT test was on that same Saturday and clashed with the game, so Mike was not able to take the test. Well, after suffering a crushing defeat against Miami, his entire football team is taking that long flight trip back to California. Mike, on the other hand, stayed an extra night in Miami and went to the Coral Gables Testing Center to take the MCAT exam on a religious exemption that Sunday. Well, having been a redshirt freshman, Mike graduated in December from college and did research from January to June, making contacts in the medical world. His football offensive coach connected him with a primary care physician at UCSF. And then Mike gets this phone call from Mike Bishop, the offensive coach of the New York Giants, asking him his statistics, his weight, his speed, and tells him, "You're on our draft board, and we're thinking of drafting you." Mike told me, I was not sure. And again, he was right, because the next day, the Giants did not draft Mike. And so Mike told me he had to make the difficult choice between acceptances into 9 medical schools or try draft B and be a journeyman in NFL. Well, Mike picked medical school. And in his own inimitable style, Mike tells me, "I don't regret the decision." Well, it's that one decision that has resulted in hundreds and thousands of patients being alive because of his medical expertise, an important decision. Well, Mike successfully graduated from medical school at UCSF. Early in his medical school, he realized that primary care was not what he was cut out for and found his calling in the operating suites, in the operating room. So he subsequently matched into general surgery at Washington University in St. Louis, initially wanting to be a trauma surgeon. The transition, Mike says, was interesting. In his words, he learned to button up and work with the likes of Joel Cooper and Jimmy Cox. Mike fondly recalls his favorite mentor, Alec Patterson, who saw something in Mike that even Mike may not have seen in himself. Mike spent 3 years doing research in transplant immunology in the lab of Mohana Kumar and subsequently stayed back in St. Louis, training in thoracic surgery. Well, Mike's stint in St. Louis was very productive in more ways than one. This is where Mike was blessed with 3 amazing kids. Interestingly, Mike originally wanted to build houses as an engineer because his grandfather was a carpenter. Subsequently, he took to sports and physical fitness and eventually entered the world of medicine. Well, guess what? His 3 children have each embodied each of Mike's passions. Mike's oldest son, Kendall, who's joining us here, completed medicine at UCSF Medical School and is now training in general surgery at the University of Southern California. His second daughter, Elena, after finishing a stint in the military, is a physical fitness and nutrition trainer in Phoenix. And his youngest daughter, Kyra, is a senior mechanical engineering student at Northern Arizona University. The apple really does not fall far from the tree. After completing his residency, Mike's first job was at USC, and right away he held a leadership position in lung transplant program there. That's when our paths crossed. And I was a research resident in training, collaborating with the resident that was doing oncology research in Mike and Ross Bremner's lab. Subsequently, when Ross moved to Phoenix, Mike moved with him, he says, to build something in the country's 4th largest metropolitan that did not have lung transplant or an esophageal program. And boy, have they built something together. As you can clearly see from these pictures, there's something about this group at Norton Thoracic Institute. They got something good going there. They're having fun times together, but in the bottom picture, more importantly, they are celebrating 1,000 lung transplants in 2022. Well, Mike has always loved his relationship with the Western Thoracic Surgical Association. He's climbed up the ladder, playing various important roles all along the way. Over the years, he's actively participated in our annual meeting and selflessly dedicated his efforts to contribute to the betterment of our association. But you all know, the real job of introducing a president is to dig up dirt. Believe me, I tried. I really, really did. And the best stories that people could tell me were how Mike would show up fully dressed in a suit in the middle of the night, put on a yellow gown, run to a patient's room and do a bronchoscopy and save a dying patient from respiratory failure. Or when Mike was at family reunion and was immediately available on the telephone when two of his partners were doing a very difficult lung transplant. Well, we all know that Mike is a gentle and soft-spoken human being. I was told that in his group, Mike is called E.F. Hutton. Because, they said, when Hutton talks, people listen. I can tell you from my experience this past year that nothing could be more true. But then there's this one patient of Jasmine Wong. Jasmine needed to leave town for the weekend. Mike covered for her patient over the weekend. All is well. Jasmine returns the following Monday, and she goes back to round on this patient. Jasmine vividly recalls this patient asking her, almost sadly, "Oh, so you're back? So Dr. Smith is not going to come and see me today?" Bewildered, Jasmine remembers saying, "Why do you ask?" Well, I am your surgeon." To this, the lady responded, yes, you are my doctor, but Dr. Smith is a tall, handsome drink of water. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that tall, handsome drink of water is a loving father, son, brother, a consummate thoracic surgeon, an absolutely gentle, well-spoken, erudite, gentle giant, my good friend, and the 49th president of the Western Thoracic Surgical Association. Let's welcome Michael Smith.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks, Ram, for that very generous introduction. And can't believe this moment is actually here. But I also want to thank you, Ram, for your support over the past year in your role as Vice President, and I look forward to your very capable leadership and the growth of our society ongoing. And it's truly been an honor and a privilege to serve as the president of this Western Thoracic Surgical Association. It's been an awesome year in carrying out the duties and business of the society, and I truly hope you all enjoy this meeting as much as I enjoyed helping to plan it. And I had fantastic guidance and leadership from the team at PRRI and Stan and RLE and April, Aviana, and Danielle. And to them, I'm forever grateful. The various committee chairs and members did an awesome job of keeping the various functions of the society on track and humming along without incident. And I'm also deeply grateful to our program co-chairs, Chris Burke and Stephanie Worrell, who selected the very best science and organized a wonderful program for us. And so, one of my last functions, the most important duties in this role is to give this address. And right now, it reminds me of what my friends and family always ask me, because they're not in medicine. So what goes through your mind when you're getting ready to start a difficult case, scrubbing your hands at the sink there? And I say it's the same thing every time. I say, "Dear God, don't let me screw this up." So here we go. So I'm going to be a little bit introspective here at first. I know Ram did a great job introducing me, but I want to tell my story too. So a little bit more about me. Some of it's brutally honest and not really all that flattering, but my life can be summed up with the following words: heroes, practice, and possibilities. And as Ram mentioned, looking back, some of my earliest memories were of wanting to be like my first hero, my dad. a great athlete and professional football player. And every Halloween, I was the same thing, a professional football player. It wasn't just a costume for me, it was who I thought I would become. And fortunately for me, I did get some of his athletic genes, and growing up, athletics usually came pretty easily to me. I had above average size, speed, and agility, but what stood out for me really wasn't my talent. It was a pattern that I noticed early on, is that when I wasn't good at something, I could get better. If a sport didn't come naturally to me, I practiced, and it always paid off. And the more I practiced, the better I became, the more I enjoyed it, the more I enjoyed it, the more I practiced, and on it went. That cycle shaped me. But academics was different for me in the beginning. By the end of the first grade, I wasn't learning to read. And the school I was in recommended that I repeat that year. And my parents considered it, but instead, they chose a different path, and they sent me off to summer tutoring. And that summer changed everything for me. I worked hard, and in the beginning, I struggled. And then something that became very familiar to me happened, and I noticed that the more I practiced, the more I learned. The more I learned, the more I enjoyed it. And the more I enjoyed it, the more I practiced, and on it went. And by the end of that summer, I was reading at fourth grade reading level going into the second grade. And from that point on, I never struggled with reading or learning again. And soon after, I changed schools, and to everyone's surprise, including my own, I tested into the gifted and talented education program in my school district. And my academic future changed forever going forward. And looking back, those early experiences in athletics and academics taught me something fundamental, in that growth isn't about where you start. It's about what you're willing to do when things don't come easily. And that lesson of practice, persistence, and the belief that I could improve has shaped everything that's followed for me. So, there were many other heroes that I'd like to recognize from my formative years that were foundational in my development. First is my Uncle Sam Robinson, and I'm glad that he's here with my Aunt Rosemary, who's a great friend of the family. My dad and he met at the University of Utah, where they were both student athletes. And they became great friends and remain so to this day. And growing up, Uncle Sam was always there for my brother and I. And I always remember him telling us repeatedly, he would say that you can be anything you want as long as you put in the work. And Sam consistently reminded me that the possibilities were endless if you had the determination and put in the effort. So his encouragement and words of inspiration and positive outlook on life itself was always something I wanted to emulate and still do to this day. And then there was Dr. Calvin Benton, who was also a great friend of the family. He was a former Air Force fighter pilot and later became a general surgeon in my hometown of Oakland and was a stalwart of my community. And he served as a very important role model for me because he was the first surgeon that I ever met in life, and he looked like me. And then there was Jo Baker, the young lady on the far left there. She also played an extremely pivotal role in my academic journey. She was a former student athlete at Cal, and when I was there, she had become the director of the athletic study table. And as you can imagine, the time and energy commitment that are required of a Division I college student athlete is pretty demanding, pretty much year-round. And Jo was responsible for connecting the student athletes with the resources needed for us to succeed. And the pivotal role that she played was during my sophomore year, as Dr. Subramanian mentioned. I was a walk-on freshman, but had worked really hard and worked my way into the starting lineup at wide receiver. So I was doing great in the athlete part, but I wasn't balancing the student part very well. And I received a grade that reflected that lack of balance. And I was pretty devastated with the grade, and sort of self-declared that I was no longer going to become a doctor. I felt like I wasn't qualified to go to medical school or become a doctor, and determined that I was going to be a physical therapist. I thought that maybe that was a lower bar that I could achieve, and was moving in that direction. And Joe found out about this, and she was having none of it. She basically pulled me aside one day, and she said to me, she said, "You can't quit on your dreams just because it feels unobtainable." What she said was pretty obvious but profound. She said that the best way to be absolutely sure that you don't become a doctor is to quit on your dreams yourself. She told me that if I stuck with it, the goal would always remain a possibility, and there was a chance. But if you quit on your dreams yourself, there was zero chance. So in retrospect, I realized that this fact is true in sports as well as pretty much everything in life, is that the 100% of the shots that you don't take, they don't score. So my early heroes in medicine and science were Mary Dahlman, PhD, may she rest in peace. She was a brilliant UCSF professor of neuroendocrine science who, as Dr. Subramanian mentioned, gave my first job just out of Berkeley in her lab as a junior research scientist, not a lab tech, but a junior scientist with my own projects. And I'm grateful to her for believing in me and teaching me the scientific method. And then there was Dr. Haile Debas. I was fortunate to have him as my mentor as a medical student. And at the time, he was chairman of the Department of Surgery and later became dean and later became chancellor of the medical school. And I was so grateful that he would afford time to sit down and talk with me and give me sage wisdom about what it took to become a successful academic surgeon. And then there was Sam Wells, who was the Department of Surgery chair at Washington University where I trained. And as a California boy who had really never spent any time outside of West Coast academia, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting into in St. Louis. So a funny story, it's funny now, but not really back then, was the night before we were supposed to start our internship. Dr. Wells had all the new interns and the house staff over to the hospital for a meeting. And I had just gotten into town that night, so I rush in and take a shower and put on something to wear and rush off to the meeting. And somehow I showed up wearing some painter pants, a vest, and some Timberlands. Everyone else was not wearing anything like that. I thought I looked pretty good, but everybody else was wearing short white coats, white pants, wingtip shoes, ties, clean-shaven faces. I can still feel the glares and stares from the chief residents that day. But anyway, Dr. Wells ran an extremely tight department of surgery with high expectations for the performance of pretty much everybody in the organization. And despite my early wardrobe gap, Dr. Wells was actually very supportive of me. And I learned a great deal from him. He reinforced in me the importance of tradition, preparation, and the expectation of excellence from myself and everyone around me. So after getting a taste of general surgery internship, I started to gravitate away from the idea of becoming a trauma surgeon and had the great fortune to rotate early in my second year on the thoracic surgery service. And there I met a very suave, bright, up-and-coming superstar thoracic surgeon named Sudhir Sundaresan. And he was a great role model for me at that time. He was very down to earth, and soon after working with him and being on the thoracic surgery service, I declared that I wanted to be a thoracic surgeon. And he immediately introduced me to Dr. Kumar, whom you all meet later in this meeting, who's a brilliant, world-renowned transplant and tumor immunologist. And I spent 3 years in Dr. Kumar's lab. And this time when Dr. Kumar was very productive under his skillful guidance. And he taught me an important lesson in that a surgeon could also be a good scientist and make important contributions. And then there was Tim Eberlein, who took over as department chair when I came back out of the lab to clinical training. And he was my greatest advocate for becoming a thoracic surgeon and actually lobbied hard to get me trained at WashU. And to him, I'm forever grateful for this. And upon completion of that training, I did go on to train in CT surgery at Barnes Hospital under the mentorship of Drs. Brian Myers, Rich Botafarano, Joel Cooper, and Alec Patterson. And this was a tremendous experience, and I learned and developed under excellent tutelage and guidance. And indeed, the most impressionable hero for me at that time was Dr. Alec Patterson, who's an extremely gifted technician with superb judgment. And he also had this superpower leadership skill of giving you enough space to grow and develop, pushing you when you needed to be pushed, and knowing when to step in when you knew you were out of your depth. And then upon completing my training, I had the great fortune to join the esteemed cardiothoracic faculty at USC. And Vaughn Starnes was the chair of CT surgery at that time, and he was very supportive of me and actually allowed me to help run the lung transplant program there right out of training. And this was a tremendous responsibility for me so early in my career. And I took over the reins for this position from Dr. Robin Cohen, who was a fantastic mentor for me and was always genuinely interested in my success and remains a great friend to this day. And by far, the most influential hero in my professional life has been Dr. Ross Bremner, who recruited me to join him at the faculty at USC and then later to St. Joe's Hospital in Phoenix. And Ross, the kind of leader we all aspire to be, he always provides a consistent ethical framework for all decisions, be it surgical, academic, or just life in general. And also importantly, he makes everybody on his team feel like they're making a contribution to something that truly matters. And I've been extremely fortunate to have met him so early in my career and to maintain proximity to him. So there it is with Ross and the team at the Norton Thoracic Institute at St. Joe's. There I've been for almost 20 years now, taking care of sick patients and their families, teaching medical students and residents and fellows, and making scientific contributions when possible. And so my life has truly been inspired by heroes, built on the foundational principle that practice leads to possibilities realized. So that's enough about my personal journey, and now I'd like to switch gears a little bit. And in this part, I'd like to talk about what comes next for all of us, with an emphasis on the idea that what came before shapes what comes next. Famous authors have said it better, like Shakespeare, who penned in The Tempest that what's past is prologue, or Mark Twain, who's thought to have said that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And I'd like to start by reminding us that while these ideas are true, we usually resist these lessons of the past. So I'd like to encourage us to embrace lessons from history that we usually resist. And one of the things that capture the sentiment of any given time period are quotes from notable figures that appeared in books, magazines, or news articles of that era. Everybody that works for me knows I like quotes. So I'd like to give you a flavor of this as we try to address this task of figuring out what comes next. First one. Everyone acquainted with the subject will recognize the light bulb as a conspicuous failure, said the president of Stevens Institute of Technology in 1880. They called it a better candle. Electricity arrived and the world reached for the nearest familiar metaphor, just a brighter light delivered differently. And in fact, in the 1870s and early 80s, it was just a cleaner, safer alternative to gas lamps. But then in the 1890s to early 1900s, we had the development of trams, telegraph, factories, and industry seemed to rewire itself, and production no longer stopped at sunset. Time itself seemed to change. And then in the 1920s to 60s, we had the development of radio, refrigeration, medicine, cinema. And it seemed that every system of modern life was built around electricity. And it stopped being a utility and became the foundation. And today, it is indeed the precondition for all modern existence. Another quote, "The horse is here to stay, but the automobile is only a novelty, a fad," said the president of Michigan Savings Bank when he was trying to advise Henry Ford's lawyers not to invest with him in 1903. And at that time, they just called it a horseless carriage. The automobile arrived, and the world saw only what was missing, the horse. Nobody saw what was coming, which was a complete reinvention of how civilization moves. Remote shopping, while entirely feasible, will flop. said an editorial in Time magazine in 1968. Early on, they just called it fancy mail because email was the internet's killer feature, a faster letter, but nobody saw what was really coming. In the 1970s to early 80s, in fact, it just was just a fancy message passing system for academics, maybe the military. But then in the 1990s, we had the development of browsers, .coms, digital storefronts, and commerce indeed did start to move online, but it's still seen that this digital technology was just a copy of things that already existed. But then in the 2000s, the early 2000s, we had the development of social networks, the cloud, smartphones, and at that point, the internet stopped just mimicking the world, but it began replacing it. And what do we have today? It is essentially the operating system of all of civilization. Now, another transition that I was acutely aware of because it happened during my training, and I was into science at that time, and it was decoding the human genome. And I specifically remember that it was quite controversial at the time, in that we couldn't figure out whether it was a journey of fearless innovation or just lavish meandering. And these quotes sort of evidence what some very smart people and academics thought. The Human Genome Project, mediocre science, terrible science policy. Most of the sequencing work will not be creative or innovative, or just a flagrant waste of federal research funds. And when you look at the timeline and the cost at a glance, you can kind of see where they were coming from. I mean, the Human Genome Project took 13 years, went from 1990 to the year 2003, at almost $3 billion and required resources from 20 institutions worldwide. But what do we have today? Genome sequencing can be done in 24 hours or less at a total cost of several hundred to $1,000, and they can be done anywhere. Desktop sequencers, mobile labs, hospitals worldwide. And we now have access to next-gen sequencing, which many of the thoracic oncologists in the room know that it's been extremely important in some of the medical advances that have been unlocked with this technology, like tumor sequencing, pharmacogenomics. It's also important in the infectious disease response to COVID-19, which allowed accelerated vaccine development and enabled real-time outbreak tracking. It's been important in polygenic risk scoring. So with the decoding of the human genome, what was once questioned now defines where we are and the future. More quotes. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. This device is inherently of no value to us, said the Western Union leadership in 1876. They were a telegraph company at the time. There's no reason for any individual to have a computer in his home, said the president of Digital Equipment Corp. In 1977. I predict the internet will soon go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 collapse, said the founder of 3M in 1995. So are we noticing any similar patterns here? Besides being utterly wrong, many of these statements were made by very knowledgeable leaders of their time. And even they lacked the imagination to see beyond what was in front of them at the time. Additionally, it should be noted that these were people with agency. And people with agency tend to be averse to change for fear of losing said agency. And this can be detrimental, as many of these leaders lost market share or whole industries because of the innovative transition which they failed to see as an opportunity. So every transformative technology is first understood through the lens of what came before it, and that lens is almost always too small. So we must train ourselves to understand not only what is being replaced, but also understand what is being made possible. So just to drive this point home, we have to be aware that being a naysayer who fails to adapt can ultimately lead to our undoing. Just remember the Blockbuster to Netflix transition. We started with the analog world of driving to the Blockbuster franchise, to physically walk the aisles, to pick out our favorite movie, hoping that it wasn't already checked out. and then taking the movie home and putting it in the VHS player, and after watching the movie, rewinding the VHS tape, driving back to the Blockbuster to get it back so we didn't get late charges. Now, we simply stream movie content anytime, anywhere, and it's always available. So many of us know the story, but back in the year 2000, the then fledgling company, Netflix, their co-founders pitched selling their company to Blockbuster for $50 million. Netflix was basically offering to use their internet streaming platform to rent out the Blockbuster movie collection. But the Blockbuster CEO at the time just about laughed them out of his office. Blockbuster basically viewed Netflix as a niche business using an unproven business model and really considered the offer a joke. Now you fast forward to today, and we have digital streaming on Netflix as well as other very successful platforms, while Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy several years later. Netflix is now worth over $400 billion, billion with a B. And at the end of the day, we humans are wired to prioritize safety, stability, and predictability. And sometimes we're wired to interpret the unknown as a threat. But unfortunately, this hard wiring in many instances can keep us stuck, left behind, or worse, completely undone. The other thing to realize is that technology is only accelerating. This depicts the years that it took a particular platform to reach 50 million users, and the gap is closing exponentially. You look at the telephone, it took 75 years to reach 50 million users. Radio, 38 years. TV, 13. Internet, 4 years. Facebook, 3. YouTube, 2. Instagram, 1 year. ChatGPT took 2 months to reach 50 million users. So when you look back in recent history, there's been 4 great technological revolutions that once they occurred, they changed life for us forever going forward. First was steam power, and the others I've mentioned, electricity, computers, and the internet. And we are now currently living through the 5th revolution, which is the adoption of artificial intelligence and automation. And this is the convergence of machine learning, intelligent automation, and robotics, which is reshaping every sector of the global economy from manufacturing to medicine. And this 5th revolution is not a single technology. It's an infrastructure layer transforming every industry simultaneously. And so I asked myself, I said, what makes this technology so powerful, so revolutionary? And what you see is that when you break it down to its sort of first principles, foundational level, it's really the difference between carbon-based intelligence and silicone-based intelligence, where carbon-based neurosubstrates basically represents how our brains and bodies work. And silicone-based substrate represents the digital and artificial intelligence worlds. And when you look at the processor capacity and speed gaps, it's not even close. For example, a neuron can fire at 200 hertz, whereas a GPU fires at 4 gigahertz. The signal velocity for a neuron is 120 meters per second, which sounds fast, but digital signal velocity can travel at the speed of light. Processing clock speed, working memory, learning speeds are multiple orders of magnitude faster for silicone. We do have a slight advantage in terms of efficiency due to the lower energy consumption in relation to the amount of parallelism that our brains can achieve. But when energy is not a limitation, the raw processing speed of silicone is not even in the same universe as carbon-based intelligence. So there was a recent news article, actually just earlier this month from NBC News, that highlighted the fact that artificial intelligence has recently overtaken human web traffic. And this is primarily agentic AI. And AI agents are software that browses, researches, and acts autonomously on behalf of its user. And it grew by 8,000% last year alone. And at last count, for the first time in internet history, AI automation has overtaken human users by a margin of 57 to 43%. Once again, this is related to the superior speed and processing power such that AI agents can navigate, read, extract, and act on thousands of web pages in seconds. So much of today's conversation around AI and robotics centers on jobs displacement. Many perceive it as a real threat to human productivity. And it is a real and important concern, but let's take a closer look at what the data and current predictions actually tell us. Goldman Sachs believes that there are around 300 million full-time jobs globally that are exposed to AI and robotics disruption. The World Economic Forum estimates that 92 million jobs will be displaced by the year 2030. However, the World Economic Forum also estimates that around 170 million new jobs will be created by that same time period. And these at-risk fields include things like administrative and clerical, customer service, transportation, logistics, retail, and entry-level tech. But the net picture is this: 92 million displaced, but 170 million created by 2030. But these new jobs will require different skill sets and likely be in different places. And so the message I take away from this is that we should adapt or risk being left behind, similar to the way some of the previous innovations left people behind. And there is historical precedence for this. For example, maybe the candle maker gave way to an electrician or lighting engineer, blacksmiths to auto mechanics and machinists, telephone operators to network engineers or customer experience leaders, and the list goes on. But the bottom line is that there are key drivers for this, and these are productivity gains that are associated with reduced cost per unit labor. And the other thing to take away from this is that innovation is actually deflationary. And I know that's hard to believe in today's sort of economic environment where all we talk about is inflation, but innovation is deflationary. But the takeaway from this is that jobs don't go away, they evolve. And the edge belongs to those that evolve with them. And so many of us professionals might say, well, this paradigm shift is all fine and good, but this doesn't really apply to us because our jobs require highly specialized knowledge and formal certification. Well, I'm not so confident that's the case, as AI has a pretty good track record of great scores on academic exams, including the SAT, GRE, LSAT, and yes, it's passed bar exams, USMLE steps 1, 2, and 3, and CPA exams. But then you might say, well, medicine is different. There's formal specialized board certification required for us to practice. And you'd be right, but AI has passed multiple specialty board certification exams as well. And so now what most of us here want to know is, what about surgery? Are surgical specialties at risk of disruption from robotics and AI? And many of us might say, well, we feel pretty secure because machines will never be trusted to perform high-stakes physical tasks that require human judgment and dexterity, especially in dynamic and uncontrolled environments. But truthfully, intelligent machines are already doing this with self-driving cars, in commercial aviation, and some forms of robotic surgery. So when you look at self-driving cars, Waymo does a study on every 100 million miles driven in their driverless taxis. And what they've seen is 91% fewer serious injury crashes versus human drivers, 80% fewer any injury crashes versus human drivers, and 96% lower injury rates at intersections. In commercial aviation, that's basically autopilot on modern airlines, which is intelligent machines, not quite AI, but these are intelligent machines, to the point now where 95% of any given flight is under autonomous control, and only 7 minutes or less is required of actual flight navigation and piloting. And when the industry looks back, they've seen an 80% decrease in fatalities since the widespread adoption of automation. Now, what about robotic surgery? This is different than what we do. This is spine surgery, which are already using some AI-assisted systems, and they see 98% screw placement accuracy compared to freehand by surgeons at 92%. So this brings up another point, which is the distinction between the types of AI agents. And earlier I talked about AI agents and how they have surpassed us in terms of web traffic on the internet. But these AI agents are entities that we can't see, you can't touch them, they don't move. They have a digital-only existence. And it's kind of like the internet itself, right? You can't see it, you can't touch it, but you know it exists. So the next concept, though, is that there is a such thing as a physical AI agent. And this actually has a physical embodiment and is able to see, touch, and move in the world. And one of the further things to conceptualize is the types of machine learning models that are used to train these agents. And the classic AI agent uses large language models for training. And then physical AI agents require a step further called vision language models for machine learning. And so when you look at the large language model, it's essentially like a text in, text out platform that processes language, words, sentences, and puts out documents. And it can reason, summarize, and generate text from learned patterns, but it can't see, it can't sense, and it can't perceive the physical world. And then there are vision language models which can see, understand, and act. And it does so by processing images in the real world or videos and language simultaneously. And it can perceive spatial relationships, objects, motion, anatomy, and act in real time by perceiving, reasoning, and responding. Or how about an autonomous electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicle, also known as an eVTOL, which are currently in use in parts of China and underdeveloped here in the US and the UK. And these are essentially self-driving air taxis with no human pilot, already in commercial use in several cities in China. And this is another great example of the current use of intelligent machines that are being entrusted with high-stakes physical tasks in uncontrolled and unpredictable environments. And so where are we today with autonomous surgical robots? Most of the data I'm familiar with comes out of Johns Hopkins and Stanford, where they have developed 2 autonomous platforms. And the first is the STAR, or Smart Tissue Autonomous Robot, or STAR system. This model has demonstrated in 2016 sutured pig intestinal anastomoses in an ex vivo model. And then in 2022, they demonstrated live pig intestinal anastomoses without human guidance. And they did demonstrate that there was equal wound healing between the autonomous and human-created anastomoses. And then the second platform, which is a bit more impressive, is the Surgical Robot Transformer Human Platform, or SRTH. And this platform is based on the widely used Da Vinci surgical robot that most of us are familiar with and many of us use, but the researchers embedded a vision, language, machine learning tool in that robot such that they train the robot watching thousands of hours of surgical video. And last year, this model demonstrated fully autonomous cholecystectomies on pig cadavers without human intervention. And by report, the model can adapt in real time to unpredictable conditions of actual surgery. And one observer described that at one point during a procedure, the robotic instrument accidentally dropped a surgical needle. And despite never being trained specifically to do so, the robot simply picked up the needle and continued with its surgical task. And so this is impressive, but we must avoid over-sensationalizing this because there are some significant limitations in the current stage of these models. These are non-perfused, non-bleeding cadavers. In addition, it seems that some of the exposure and dissection may have been done by humans before the robot came in and did the clipping and the cutting of the important structures. But it's still impressive nonetheless. But some of us may be underwhelmed, but I would say that this is still early days. It kind of reminds me of back in the day when it would take several seconds or a minute or so to download a single web page on your cathode ray tube monitored pre-486 desktop computer running on a dial-up internet connection. It kind of sounded like this. I know I'm dating myself here. But I just remember this like it was yesterday, and at the time I remember saying to myself, this is a cool gadget, but it's going nowhere. I too suffered from a lack of imagination because I could not see what that technology would ultimately make possible. In all seriousness, though, I suspect that like all innovative transitions that preceded it, or this one, it will be controversial. And I think the question for us is, should we support the direction of movement that we may be going to at some point? And I think what we should focus on is sort of a first principles approach of who benefits. And I think there are at least two categories of folks that will benefit. And first, of course, is the patient. There may be greater precision and consistency. There may be reduced variability between surgeons. There may be improved access to expert-level technique, especially in underserved areas, which is a problem currently. There may be more reproducible outcomes for research, and maybe fewer technical errors, we would hope. And for the surgeon, there will be better use, hopefully, of surgeon expertise, perhaps judgment and decision-making, focusing on complex cases rather than just the repetitive technical parts of what we do. And there may be reduced fatigue and improved ergonomics, such as less physical stress across long procedures or high-volume surgical days, which has become more apparent to me as I get older. And there may be real-time adaptation using imaging and sensors, better training and objective feedback for our trainees, and expanded surgical capacity such that there's a greater throughput in case volume without proportional increases in staffing. So I do believe that more spectacular innovation is yet to come, but there are some significant limitations of AI and autonomous surgical robots that will probably persist into the foreseeable future that I think we need to be aware of. And these are things like limited judgment and uncertainty, poor performance in unpredictable situations, an incomplete perception of tissue and context. And number 4 is very important, no human connection and communication. These machines can't build trust or deliver empathy. They'll be poor at nuanced conversations regarding risk, fear, or consent, and no true understanding of patient values, especially on an individual basis. There will obviously be ethical and legal limitations, like who's responsible when the AI or autonomous robot makes an error. And then there will be some technical constraints and reliability issues. These machines will fail. And then there's data dependency and bias, such that these machines are only as good as the data that they're trained on, and their performance will be limited by that. And there'll be risk of bias because of this across patient populations. And there'll be a poor generalization to rare or novel cases because of this as well. And so this is where we as human surgeons, we need to hone our skill sets, because AI and autonomous robots may become superior at pattern recognition, data processing, and repetitive precision, but we must continue to own and dominate with judgment, ethics, empathy and connection to our patients, creativity and leadership, as well as moral accountability and owning up to surgical outcomes, both good and bad. Now, I can't say when, but I do believe that there will come a day when autonomous surgical robots will be ready for routine use cases. That being said, we know there will be times when these intelligent machines will fail or be overwhelmed by the rare or complex or uncontrolled or unpredictable nature of a particular case. And in this situation, the human surgeon must be ready to take over with human surgeon dexterity, judgment, and creativity. But one of the potential problems I see is that in the future, as this automation becomes safer, our skill sets may become more fragile. And this issue will be true for both seasoned surgeons as well as young surgeons or trainees. And this issue can be broken down into at least four different but related parts. And one is the infrequent exposure to the edge cases, where AI may handle the routine cases flawlessly, but the complex, rare, and unpredictable cases, the ones that require the highest expertise, will be shuttled over to the human intervention. But number two is I see that there may be a skill degradation with a training deficit, kind of a use it or lose it proposition for the seasoned surgeon, or a never get it problem for the trainee, where manual dexterity and clinical judgment atrophy without regular repetitions. And surgeons will accumulate fewer reps of foundational skills that they need when the automation fails. Then there'll be an automation dependency, which is an over-reliance on automated system, which reduces the operator's capacity to function independently, and upon failure, the human surgeon is now required to perform at expert levels when they haven't even had recent practice in the most basic cases. And then there will be a reduced situational awareness. And when automation manages a procedure, the human operator kind of shifts into a monitoring mode. And this passive mode may reduce the engagement, narrow the attention, and then delay recognition of developing problems in real time. I had the opportunity to speak to a veteran commercial airline pilot about this, and he stated that this is a real problem in their industry. And he stated that they have chosen to deal with this primarily with virtual reality flight simulators. And perhaps we can take a page from this playbook, using virtual reality for training and upkeep of our skill sets, as well as other innovative techniques like machine perfused cadavers that we're actually using at our institution with the knowledge donors in anticipation of some of these problems in the future. So one final set of historical quotes. Many of us will also remember the introduction of thoracic and laparoscopic surgery. And some of the more seasoned traditional surgeons, I remember making statements like, this is a dangerous fad, or you can't do proper surgery through a telescope, or this violates fundamental principles of surgery. So what we once questioned was whether surgery could be done through small incisions in a camera. Now we're questioning whether it can be done with intelligent machines. And this pattern isn't new, only the technology is. So my final thoughts are that we should be mindful of the history of technological innovation and let that guide our foresight about what to expect from the future. It's unlikely that autonomous robots will replace cardiothoracic surgeons, but surgeons who adopt this technology may displace those who don't in the future. And we should prepare for this transition with the understanding that technology may very well enhance our hands, but it cannot replace our empathy, compassion, judgment, and creativity, our minds. So the imperative for the future surgeon may not be whether to adapt to robotics and AI, but how. So, in closing, I'd like to make some more acknowledgments. Most of what we do is only made possible by the people who support us on a daily basis. And over the years, the NTI has grown to over 200 people, which is a combination of physicians, advanced practice practitioners, and support staff, driven by a shared, relentless commitment to providing the Southwest with world-class thoracic surgery, pulmonary medicine, and solid organ transplantation. And we're like a great big family, and I want to recognize some of the folks that were able to come out and support me in this meeting. And first is our administrative assistant, Tracy DeMarbier, events coordinator, Allison Robofsky, our clinic operations manager, Liz Viveros, our vice president of the NTI, Brandy Krushelniski, Director of Business Operations, Margaret Blue, Director of Transplant Services, Kate Grief, our lead CVR nurse, Tim Krusheniski, three of our awesome nurse practitioners, Marcel Gurian, Jake Keith, and Sandy Ogala. And last but not least, I want to recognize my surgical partners, Ross Bremner, Jasmine Wong, Samad Hashimi, Sumit Middle, Laura Shaheen, Nathan Zwincher, Sarah Counts, and John Tedesco. And we have a fantastic group of pulmonologist partners, and I'm grateful to have Dr. Ashwini Arjuna here with us today. She's a big fan of the Western and attends regularly. So in addition, I'd like to mention, in addition to the people I mentioned previously, who served as role models, mentors, trailblazers, and facilitators of my journey, I'd also like to thank the people in my life who inspire me the most behind the scenes. And first off is my parents, Judy and Charles Smith, who came from humble beginnings, yet understood the importance of education and achievement, and they provided the stable foundation for my brother and I to achieve and flourish and become first-generation college graduates, and also to go on and follow their example in raising our own families with those same ideals. And my mom wasn't able to travel, but I'm so happy to have my dad here today. And then there's my little brother, Kevin, who my parents saved all the truly athletic genes for. Kevin graduated UCLA and went on to play in the NFL for 6 years, and he's now retired. And I'm lucky to have Kevin here with his wife, Paige, who's a pediatrician and neonatologist in Phoenix, as was mentioned previously. And they have two wonderful children in Grant and Morgan, who are both super gifted athletes like their dad. And I'd also like to acknowledge my older sister, Frances, who has taught me that family is not simply about shared history, but also about showing up, giving love, and choosing one another. I'm also grateful to have my cousin Erica here, who was more like a little sister to me when we were growing up. I always felt the responsibility for being her protector when we were growing up, and now she looks out for me, helping me see the red flags and blind spots in life that I tend to ignore or simply overlook, and she's brutally honest with me about it. And Erica's a systems and contract manager for a major health system, and she lives in Antioch, California with her son Joseph, who's an ASU graduate with a degree in communications. I also want to thank my partner Joanne, who's here with me. I'm truly blessed to have her in my life. She is without a doubt the most grounded, giving, selfless person that I know. Her love and support, encouragement inspire me to be a better person each day. And last but not least, I'm delighted to have my children here, Kendall, Elena, and Kyra. Kendall's currently a second-year general surgery resident at USC. Elena is a fitness trainer and currently getting her certification in nutrition and fitness. Kyra just graduated Northern Arizona University with a degree in mechanical engineering. And by the way, Kyra, you were the inspiration for the subject of this talk. She'll understand that. I'm extremely proud of all three of you, and it has been the highest calling and highlight of my life to help raise you and support you. And you all have become such wonderful human beings, and there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about you. So in closing, I just want to say that I remember my first WTSA meeting. It was the 2007 meeting at the Tamaya Resort in New Mexico. And it was such a revelation to see this great combination of excellence in scientific pursuit, collegiality, and mentorship while maintaining an emphasis on friendship and family. And I couldn't wait to bring my family here, and did so the next year and pretty much every subsequent year thereafter. And all these years later, I'm happy to say that the WTSA has maintained these attributes that first attracted me here and all of us, and keeps us coming back. And I look forward to enjoying the rest of this year's meeting with all of you, and I thank you for your trust and confidence, and it's been an honor to serve the society in this capacity. Thank you.